Hello and welcome to the Cardiac Cats YouTube channel. I'm here live. I'm your host, Jacob Shorba, and today I'm joined by Toriano, who's going to be starting his own YouTube channel here soon. So wanted to have him on, talk some draft talk, and do a mock draft for you guys tonight. Should be some fun. So how are you doing today, Toriano?
I'm doing pretty good, Jacob. I'm happy to be here, happy to join you, and I'm looking forward to starting my channel, Toriano Knows Ball. And if you know me from Twitter, I'm excited to talk to you guys today.
Yeah, for sure. There's a very active group of people. I always see the same, like 3 or 4 guys most of the time. You're one of them. So I definitely know there's some interest in talking about the Jaguars. So it's all awesome. But yeah,
Yes, sir.
we're gonna have a real-time mock draft we're gonna do tonight. Probably go through the first 3 or 4 rounds of it. Really just the big picks. If you got any questions around the Jaguars, even in general, but mainly talking about the draft, let us know. We'll kind of monitor that, talk about some prospects, and get ready for this draft in a few weeks. So I know you're a big Brian Branch guy. We were talking about that, one of the first things, because that's really the big question is who is the best player at the first pick. So I guess give me some thoughts on, like, why do you like Brian Branch the most out of every prospect in this draft that's realistically available there?
Yeah, realistically available, I think that Branch is the best option because he fills our biggest need on defense, which is the slot position. We do not want to see Trey Herndon take over that role for another year. I do think that you need another depth piece behind Branch if you do select him, because I don't want to see Trey Herndon again on the inside, and it's a little difficult to see him on the outside again as well. So I think you really just want him to be a back end roster spot. But I think Branch is the best fit because of his instincts, his tackling ability. He's very intelligent. I believe they did a SR testing on him, and he's one of the best processing cornerbacks in the draft. I think he can play inside in the box. I think he can play at the strong safety spot. He can play in the slot, and he can play the free safety spot. So there's a lot of versatility there. Caldwell loves versatile players. We see that with Devin Lloyd, Trevon Walker, even a Tyson Campbell who can play on both sides on the outside. So I really love his athleticism. I love his intellect, and I really love his fit. So that's why he's one of my favorite players.
Yeah, Branch was definitely one of my big guys early on too. I think you can make a very strong argument that he is the best pick because for some people, you see slot corner as the biggest need on this team when talking about talent acquisition rather than what needs to improve the most. Because when we're talking about what needs to improve the most, you can talk about in-house development. You can talk about players getting better. Like we could say maybe
Mhm.
linebacker or the pass rush is where we need to improve the most. But you could see Devin Lloyd get better, Chad Muma get better, Trayvon Walker and Josh Allen develop. So maybe it's not outside of house acquisition, but if you're considering all that, where they might need it the most is that slot corner spot. And to me,
Mhm.
there's no doubt that Brian Branch is the best player in this draft for that, at least for the first couple years. I mean, it's always
Yeah.
possible some prospect just ends up being a home run hit later, but Branch is the clear guy. He was really impressive, just all around talented corner, and that's why they're interested in him at this point.
Yeah, and I was very excited to see them do an individual workout with him at his pro day at Alabama's pro day. And I really loved the DB work that I saw, even though it was a brief clip, and it went very viral in the Jaguars community because he's been one of the key guys that we're aware that could be there at 24. And I've even seen some potential that he may be there at 56 with the positional value. So he's a big target for me. I think he has the size for slot. I think he has the athleticism. I think he has the ball tracking. If you've seen a few of his highlights, he has some amazing interceptions. He is also, I think he's the best tackler in this entire class on defense. He has the highest tackling rate for any DB,
Yeah.
and I believe he's top 5 in tackling percentage for any player in the draft. So he's an adept tackler. He's an instinctual player. He makes plays on the ball. He's always around the ball. And those are the type of guys that you want on your defense.
he did stand out to me as a tackler too. Definitely something to note. And if you want to see how impactful of a player he can be, one game that's just really easy to see it where you can't deny it is just watching his game against Kansas State. I mean, he was dominant, like heck of a way to go out from the program. And I think that was really where we saw him go from what we saw as maybe a luxury pick at 24 for Jacksonville. That's probably going end of first round, early second round, to being talked about as early as like pick 10. And, now we're kind of seeing him fall back as more prospects get talked about, more prospects get pushed up the board because people are quite frankly pushing agendas for some part. And, we'll see how it falls. But I think Branch could definitely be there. I would not be one bit mad if that was the selection. I like a few other guys too. I mean, we've talked about Dalton Kincaid on here, Osiris Torrance, another talented player. People even like Darnell Washington at that pick. So some other names for sure. I do got a comment though, asking how you feel about Chris Rodriguez. So I'm assuming you have a big opinion on him. Of course, we're not talking first round here, but that's all good.
Yeah, I really like Chris Rodriguez on day 3. I think he is one of the better pass blocking running backs in this class. He's a very strong inside the guard, inside the tackle runner. He's very experienced from Kentucky. I think he's a very powerful runner. He's a very good goal line work running back. And like we've talked about before a lot, as far as being Jaguars fans, we need another pass blocking running back because Jermichael Hasty is the best in the running back room right now, currently, as it stands, at pass blocking for Trevor Lawrence. So if you're going to go and address the running back room again, you have to make sure you get somebody that can work the goal line and that can protect Trevor. Because I don't believe that Travis Etienne is there yet. Maybe that's another step in his game. But the biggest thing for Travis Etienne for me is to work on that strength and to work on his goal line work. Because if he becomes a complete back, we're talking about a top 5 running back in the NFL.
Yeah, I think he's really close to that level. And that comes down ultimately to, at this point, like, what do they do with the offensive line in that first round? Like, will they hit it? Will they go get a Torrance? Or maybe it's even the second round, trading up for a guy or getting someone who shouldn't have been available at 56. I definitely think that Etienne has the capability to be the best running back in the league. I think you could see him put on a season where he is the best at it. And it just comes down to whether the Jaguars improve enough with the blocking. Because, we saw, like, against Kansas City, for example, I went to both games, and they could not run the ball. I mean, if they had to, it had to be outside. It had to be just off of Etienne's speed. They couldn't run it up the middle because they didn't really have the guys who could perform against some of the better interior defensive lines. So I kind of hope that they address that at some point. That would be nice. But, there's other picks that could be really dang good in the first round too. But Chris Rodriguez, definitely one of the better backs. My guy would be Kenny McIntosh. And I think I would say that because I think he offers more of that receiving element from the backfield, which they don't really have a whole ton of. Now, Dearness Johnson can offer that. We've seen him step in with the Cleveland Browns and be ridiculous as a running back, one of the better guys in the league as far as a reserve player. And so you have a good guy there, and it's kind of hard to imagine getting a fourth guy and then getting rid of Connor, but he might be one because you could kind of classify him as an offensive weapon almost. I think that's how I'd have to see him on the team. Maybe jet sweeps and stuff.
Yeah, a lot of jet sweeps work. For me, Connor, I really believe that if he can be that goal line back, or, we just got Dearness Johnson. So I believe that he can really work the goal line as well. He's a very good power back, has a ton of potential still, not a lot of wear and tear in the NFL. So we know what he's capable of when we've seen him get some tread in Cleveland. I think he has the potential to be one of the better running back twos in the NFL if given the ball. And I could see him getting a lot of goal line work if Travis Etienne still continues with that fumbling issue. So if we don't see Travis Etienne get stronger this offseason, I expect for at least 4 to 5 touchdowns, for my fantasy players out there. I
Oh
expect
yeah,
for 4 to 5 touchdowns from Johnson this year.
that's gotta just not trying to get too far off topic, but that has got to be a stream we do at some point this off season is talking about fantasy football prospects on the Jaguars, because that's kind of a fun conversation with ETN, because you do have other guys in the backfield now that could take away from him, or he could just be that dominant guy that ends up being a steal in the draft. But yeah, I'm excited for the running back room this year. I think they've got a lot of really solid players in there, and it's just a matter of setting them up for success at this point. We got
For
asked
sure.
about Jamie Robinson. I probably butchered his first name. I apologize for that. Honestly, I don't know as much on him. I haven't got to watch a lot of film with him. I got like 110 prospects in and then just hit a brick wall. So there's some guys I'm not familiar on, but have you watched anything on him? You have any like comments or?
Yeah, I have watched a little bit of Jamie Robinson. I believe that is how it's pronounced. And I believe Julian in our stream here, he's a big fan of of Jamie as well. I have watched a little bit of him. He is, more of a kind of in that same mold as Brian Branch. He can play the slot, he can play deep, he can play box. He's a very interesting prospect. Has good size, good mobility. He didn't test athletically as some people thought he would, I believe. So I don't see him going earlier than day 3. I think he could go in the 4th round. So if you don't get a guy like a Jartavius Martin or Quan Martin, or a Brian Branch, I think you could look to Jamie Robinson to kind of be that great value pick in the 4th round to play that slot role and then fill in for Rayshon Jenkins, kind of like we've talked about with Brian Branch. He is good value in the 4th round, so it does make sense to look into him, but I haven't seen anything that the Jags are reportedly looking into him either.
Yeah, I haven't heard much about him. We've heard probably like 10 or 15 guys the teams talk to at this point, so there's not a huge list. But
Yeah.
I mean, that would be a smart pick later in the rounds. I hope we get our hands on someone early. I hope that just a good player falls. Ideally, it's the 2nd round for me. Like, what I would like to see is Clark Phillips at 56 if I had like
Mhm.
my ideal world, or Tyreek Stevenson there. Kind of torn
Okay.
between the two of them, but those are guys I really like at corner this year. But there's some really good options later in the draft too, for sure. Now,
Oh, yes.
yeah, I mean, you mentioned one, Jartavius Martin, for example. Kind of talked about more recently than he was before. He was kind of a forgotten name, but you want to get another guy who's been more of a safety but moved into the slot. That's what you could get with him. Now, we
Mhm.
might, for a second here, kind of look at this draft, because we're already flying in this minute per pick. So we've got 7 selections before we go here.
Yes.
So,
And Will Levis just went off the board.
yeah, I know he was a big target for sure, but I guess we're not getting the 2 quarterback action. But we've got Bijan Robinson, who is unfortunately out of the cards. It's just kind of the situation. But
Yeah.
you've got Lucas Van Ness kind of falling down the board. Nolan Smith as well, who
Mhm.
he could definitely go before the pick. And then talking about Brian Branch, who, oh gosh, I'm so sorry. He just got taken by the Steelers as I said that.
Yeah, I was kind of looking at the Steelers and looking at the Vikings and
Mm-hmm.
hoping that they wouldn't take him. That's a very interesting selection by the Steelers as well, because I would think that they need more of an outside corner.
Yeah,
Um,
that's not very intelligent by him. It's kind of a dumb move.
yeah, and more so in the top half of the draft. I've heard a lot of the chatter about Brian Branch going as early to as 10 to the Eagles, but I don't think the slot position is highly valued as a top 10 selection yet. I do know that, the league is trending to where slot is more of a starter now, and a slot DB is more on the field about 60 to 65% of the time now,
Herndon
just
was
because of the 3 wide
75.
receiver sets.
Yeah,
It's around 75%
he
now.
was 75% of the time on the field. It's even higher in Jacksonville. Just crazy. I mean, it's
Yeah.
essentially a
So
starter.
at this, it's a starter. You know, you, you have to find good value at that spot. So for me, I really, if Nolan Smith doesn't fall here to us, I'm really trying to look at the available DBs, um, or if Osiris Torrance is there. Honestly,
Yeah, so Van Ness, I'm not a big guy on. I think
yeah,
it's a ton of projection. Him being in the first round to me is insanity to an extent. Like I see how he could be really good, but he went from being like a third round guy to just like overnight being shot into the top 10. Nolan Smith, like he's a great edge rusher to bring in because he's played with Walker. He's also your speed threat. I mean, literally the perfect definition of it in this draft. Although the weight was a little questionable. And then, yeah, you got some other options here. So we'll see you the. Okay, they got Lucas Van Ness. That's fine.
yeah. And for me, in the beginning of the pre-draft process, with my first official mock draft that I was looking into, I had Van Ness as a second round player. Now I had him
Yeah.
as a late first, early grade, but I don't. There's a lot of projection with him, and normally when I grade guys out at the second round, it's because you can tell they can play, but you have to get them at the right fit. And with a second round guy, you're shooting for potential that this guy could have been a first round talent, but he
Oh.
slipped to us here.
Yeah.
What happened?
I hate this draft.
Who did he miss out on?
Torrance is gone now, which is
Oh my
very
gosh.
very unfortunate. So actually, I will ask really quick. Do you want to like be open to trading back here? Not that we will, but like actually take offers, or do you just want to select at 24? It's up to you. Because
He went at 20.
there's still guys, but you could also
Mm.
get like an extra pick.
What's the DB board looking like?
So at DB, you've got Deontay Banks, Cam Smith, Keely Ringo, and then Emmanuel Forbes. Then you get down to like Clark Phillips and Tyreek Stevenson down here. I would, in this situation, like you could be open to offers and then just determine it once you get to the pick because if Nolan Smith is there, you could land him.
If Nolan Smith or Deontay Banks are there, I think we select one of them. Other than that, I think you trade back. But right now, I'm kind of stuck between if we really want to select the edge or not, because historically, taking the edge between picks 20 through 32 hasn't historically been bread and butter.
I remember a 20th selection that didn't go too well for this team pretty recently.
Pretty recently. Yeah, and I'm pretty sure Jags fans are very aware of that selection, as well as a former number 9 selection as well.
Oh yeah,
So,
that guy.
yeah.
You think Chaseon's gonna make his way to Carolina after this next year?
It's trending that way. They're essentially picking up all of our forgotten players.
Yeah.
Couple of second round picks, couple of first round picks. It wouldn't be too bad for them. They have a little squad over there in Carolina they're brewing up a little bit of talent over there, I will admit.
Yeah.
I think they really are just missing a quarterback. They have a solid offensive line, solid wide receiver core. Of course they have Chark and Chenault, our Duval boys, back together.
I can't believe they didn't get Marvin Jones. That felt like the next move. I mean, they really just love that 2020 Jaguars team.
Pretty much.
To answer a couple questions really fast in chat, we could talk about them a little more after the pick. Favorite tight end prospect for me is Kincaid, and then also talked about Van Ness not really being used a lot. That is a good point too with him. Like you really don't know what he is too because he was barely on the field, and there really wasn't much of an excuse for that.
Yeah,
that's something I forgot to mention at least.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of concerns about him not starting at Iowa. Similar concerns that there were about Travon Walker last year, about him not being a full-time starter in Georgia.
Yeah, we got okay. So our picks up. Sorry, we've got one offer. Nolan Smith just got taken to. Our offer sucks. I mean, technically this would be great long term, but we're not taking future picks, right?
Yeah.
Okay. In reality, this would probably be accepted because this first rounder is going to be really high, and you get a third,
Mm-hmm.
but we're going to reject that. So we got half a minute here. Michael Mayer probably not going. You got Dalton Kincaid. Oh my gosh. This board is barren. I really like Kincaid, but we don't have to go that way. We could go with someone else if you want. Darnell Wright's here,
Mm-hmm.
Cam Smith. Who you want to go with? You don't got
And
anyone in
Darnell
chat
Wright and
yet.
Cam Smith are there.
Yeah, 10 seconds. Yeah, tell me.
Let's go. Let's go with your guy Kincaid.
Okay.
Let's go with
I had
it.
1 second left. It's almost like the Minnesota Vikings way back. Oh gosh. So I mean, yeah, that didn't fall very well. I like Kincaid a lot. I really do.
Yeah.
But obviously, like, you want more options there. I mean, in
Yeah.
all honesty, that's probably the worst board I have seen in like the last month I've been on here. And Banks was gone off the board too. So
yeah, the board just didn't fall right.
yeah, I mean, Michael Mayer, I don't think he's as good of a fit for the team. Brian Brissy is just all hype. And I get why things went the way they did for him. I'm not trying to just trash him, but he's unproven, and you can't really take that with the first pick. Cansey, I could see that. He's not as high for me, though. And then, like, Zay Flowers, really good receiver, but I don't know if you're going that direction in the first round. So as much of a panic pick as that was, I don't think we really screwed that up that bad.
No, and I've seen Kincaid mocked to us a lot. So it was pretty realistic. And with the way the board fell, Branch gone, Banks gone, Torrance gone. You know, pretty much all of the top DBs that we were looking at, even the edges, which I really didn't want to consider an edge of that selection. But if the edge was the best available player, then we go edge.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, I am so glad that we avoided what would be, in my opinion, Taven Bryan 2.0 and Brian Brissy.
Oh, yeah.
But
I pray to God that does not happen in the first round. In the second round, sure.
yeah, the main two players that I really want to avoid are Keely Ringo and Brian Brissy.
Yes.
You know,
Speaking the truth here. Yeah, I have to agree with that. Those are the two guys that have been mocked to the Jaguars that I don't really want to see too early. So.
see.
Yeah, one guy really does not like that Giants Brian Brissy pick in here. My gosh.
They really wanted him?
Yeah. I think he's just making fun of him, actually. But he might have won. Might be like reverse psychology.
Yeah. Like, turn him to me.
Yeah. No, guys they could have taken there. I mean, I think, like, Darnell Wright could make sense. I'm not as big on him as the consensus. But
yeah.
I get why people would take him. And then Cam Smith is someone I kind of view him like Jalen Ramsey. Not that he's that good, right? But kind of a similar player in the sense that he can play all over. He's got that really competitive mentality. I think he's got it more under control than what Ramsey did. And I think he could be a really good corner in the league. But
yeah.
I don't think he was the best player on the board at that point. And then after that, you're just kind of reaching for a prospect.
Yeah, I think at this point, with the Kincaid selection, you know, we talked about this before the stream, that it's not looking likely that we'll get a long-term extension with Ingram. Just the way that the market has looked and the way that he's argued that he's more of a dual wide receiver tight end. And it seems like he wants to get paid like a wide receiver. And I don't think that the Jaguars will be willing to do that. I don't think you're going to get him at $18 million a year unless he comes out and has over 1,000 yards with Trevor Lawrence.
Yeah.
And with Calvin Ridley, I don't foresee that.
Yeah, I agree with that. I don't think they should pay him more than what, say, Travis Kelce makes. And Travis Kelce isn't the top of the market right now, but he's still paid a pretty decent amount. And I think you can replace Evan Ingram if you go get a guy like Kincaid. It's not getting Kincaid isn't necessarily the best pick for 2023, right? Like it's more so of a pick for the long term. And you could also at the same time keep Evan Ingram and have Kincaid because you saw them operate that kind of or that kind of offense in Philadelphia, and those guys were on the field a good amount. But you're kind of talking about the argument for why they look at why Evan Ingram looks at himself as more of a receiver. You look at the amount of snaps he took last year, almost 1,000 flats, 998. You add up the amount of time he was in the slot and out wide, you have, what is that, like 530 snaps in a receiver position. So the majority of the time he was on the field, he was out there as a receiver rather than a tight end, because that's your in-line position on here. So he wants to argue for that more and wants to get paid like that. And so you're probably looking at Christian Kirk, what he got paid, and he's probably putting himself close to that value, which I don't think anyone else is going to pay him it. And if he hits the market, he might just leave at that point. It might be something where he feels disrespected. Now, that's all projection, of course. This is like going to happen next year if it happens. But yeah, I would definitely consider getting a second tight end early in the draft at some point, or maybe going after a Zach Kuntz or Payne Durham later on.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Zach Kuntz as well as Luke Schoonmaker.
Yeah.
So, I mean, in the case that we don't land Kincaid here, which I think is for the way the situation played out, I think Kincaid was the best player available, and then next to Cam Smith. If you feel which I feel like the corner and slot position are a lot deeper than the tight end position at the top, I think you can go grab a Clark Phillips, like you said, or Cam Smith could slide to 56, and you get both of them.
Yeah, if Cam Smith slid, that would be really nice. I doubt he does on here because he usually goes around the 8 picks or so in the second round, but there are still some pretty solid corners that you could see fall to 56. I think the 2 guys, well, actually, we'll say 3 because we've got one being mentioned in the chat a lot here. You've got Clark Phillips, who could be there just because of size, despite how well he played. You've got Tyreek Stevenson, who is an extremely physical guy who can play inside and also brings a fantastic culture fit, as does Clark Phillips, too, because really anyone from Utah, and this also includes Dalton Kincaid, who we got, a lot of those guys are really high character guys just because of what happened at that program the last couple of years. Like, they're people who grew up and understand what it means to play on a team and be a team player. And so you get that with both those guys. And you've also got DJ Turner, who's been mentioned by Julian in the chat, who is a fantastic athlete at the position and one of the fastest guys. Just off of that alone, I think that he could end up being a great player for the team. I mean, it might be kind of similar to Tariq Woolen, where you see him get drafted, second or third round, and then just come out as a stud in the NFL.
Wow, that is a phenomenal selection for the Steelers. I think the Steelers have won the draft so far.
Yeah, so who they got here? They got Darnell Wright.
They have
and
Branch.
Oh, yeah, they did Branch. Which, look, Branch is a great player, but it might not have been
it wasn't the best fit
for them. Yeah, not the best fit. But at the same time, you're drafting value. And if that's how they see it, that's how they see it. But you also look at the picks after. It's like you might have other players you could consider being more valuable to that franchise and the way they operate. But yeah, Darnell Wright's a good selection there for sure. Now, do we got anyone on this board that you would trade up for in the second round? Guys you would consider in that realm?
Juan Jones. I see Anton Harrison. We don't need Darnell Washington following the Kincaid selection. I think the main guys that I would be looking at currently would be guys like Clark Phillips. We've talked about him a lot in this stream. I think Emmanuel Forbes is a big name. BJ Ojolari is a big name for me. BJ Ojolari would be my favorite edge to get out of this draft class. Um, I think
100%.
he, I think he had like, I know this is another flashback for a lot of people that are a lot of Jags fans. Another LSU edge with quote unquote the best pass rushing bag. I think that BJ is a better player than Caleb coming out of college. And I think he's more polished. I think he has more bend. I think he has a little bit more intellect against the run. I think he's a better edge setter. So I think you can get him. And if you lose Josh Allen following this year, I think you're comfortable with BJ Ojulari taking that step up in year 2 following that. Now, if you're able to keep and retain Josh Allen going forward, you have a very nice edge rushing trio for the foreseeable future with Ojulari, Allen, and Trevon Walker.
Yeah, that's a really good group. I got a hot take here, real quick. I quite frankly, with Ojulari, I think that he has, by a bit, the most advanced pass rush repertoire and set of moves in this entire class, including Will Anderson and all these other guys. From what I saw, like, he's not even comparable to about anyone in this class. Will Anderson's probably the closest. Like, Miles Murphy still needs to develop. Lucas Van Ness, develop. All these other guys, Nolan Smith even develop. Like, these top people at that position, even throwing like Tyree Wilson, you look at what Ojulari brings and how creative he is at using his pass rush moves. It's just not even comparable to the rest of the class. And I'm quite frankly kind of shocked that he is not a bona fide first round selection to most people.
Yeah.
And you think about the role with this team too, the first year. Like, we don't need more run stoppers, we need pass rushers. And to bring him in a role where the first season he is coming in on passing downs or maybe some more snaps outside of that, but mainly passing downs, that's a perfect role for him. That's a really good start to his career. You can develop him, you can get him confidence early on, and he can take on a bigger role with the team after the next year. So yeah, I agree on Ojulari. He's fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, to me, Ojulari and potentially maybe a Keon White, but I don't really foresee Keon White being a guy that you trade up for, just because he doesn't have the full polish as much as Ojulari, as far as being a designated pass rusher coming into year 1. I think he can get after the passer. I think he can help in the run. I think he can play 3 tech and on the edge. You continue to add to that versatility on the D line, but I don't think you trade up for him necessarily. I know that he's been mocked a little bit higher, especially in the automated sims that you may do. Keon White may be going in the 40s, but I think I feel comfortable with the projection that he may land to you in the 50s at 56. If maybe you hear chatter that he may go at like 52, 53, maybe you trade up to 50 and you go grab him. But I don't think you trade up into the top portion of the second round for a guy like Keon White.
I wouldn't even trade up for him. I mean, maybe a couple selections if the board looks bad, but I think he's someone that could fall to 56. And there goes Ojulari, unfortunately. But I think you'll still have other guys on the board you could choose from at that point if you want to go edge. Another guy mentioned here, I hope I'm saying his last name right, because I've heard a lot of different ways, so forgive me if I just butcher the crap out of it. Adibari, he's at Northwestern.
Yes.
He's someone that might fit a lot of your speed element you're wanting, and then he's been more versatile as a guy, kind of a tweener, which isn't necessarily a great thing, but could be kind of what the Jaguars want as far as getting someone who's versatile. And we also had Julius Brents mentioned, which I'll be honest with Brents, I'm not a huge fan, and I have not watched enough film to where maybe I have the best opinion on him. I watched mainly the TCU game, and that might kind of explain why, because he went up against Quinton Johnston. But he looked like a guy that, like, he has the tools to be able to do it, but just a lot of development needs to happen.
Yeah. For me, if they go outside corner, which I think Julius Brents is a strictly outside corner,
Yes.
I think if you're going for a guy in the second round that you want to find the heir apparent for Darius Williams, which most likely we are exiting from his contract next year. I think if you want to find an heir apparent that needs to develop for a year, that can play some snaps for you and give Darius a breather, give you another big body to throw out there, I think Julius is a good fit for us. I think we like to play a lot of man coverage, zone, fire blitz. So I think for us to add Julius is very intriguing. I believe he's 6'4", 6'3", 6'4", 210, 215. I believe he runs a 4.4. So he's a pretty big athletic guy. Played a lot of man and is very experienced in that. It's very sticky in coverage, but like you said, got a little shown up in that TCU game. I think he does have a lot of development, but he is a great option if you want somebody that can be an understudy for Darius Williams. And another guy that I like on the outside for that is Tyreek Stevenson.
Yes.
And I have him as a borderline first round grade.
He's in the first round for me. I've got him, was it 27 on here?
Mm-hmm.
He's like right below Clark Phillips, and they're like neck and neck for me.
Mm-hmm.
Stevenson's fantastic.
Yeah, I think he's one of the better DBs to come out of Miami recently. And I think with his size, his polish, I think he's great in man coverage. He has great long speed. He can recover if he's beat. And the length, it's phenomenal. You know, it's very comparable to Joey Porter Jr., the length that he has, but he just doesn't have the tape that Joey Porter has. He hasn't necessarily played the exact same level of competition. And I think that one of the bigger things is he's not getting a lot of coverage. I think if he was highlighted a little bit more, I think if Miami had a little bit of a better year, they would be talking about this guy as a first round prospect. And I've seen a lot of guys like Jordan DeLugo really highlight Tyreek Stevenson, but I haven't really heard a lot of talk about him being a potential selection.
I have heard him a lot, and this is from, I think, Bro Schmo and then that franchise guy mainly. They've talked about him to the Baltimore Ravens or the Minnesota Vikings in the first round. That's where I've seen his name pop up constantly. And of course, well, Bro Schmo's kind of biased, I would say, because for him, he's a Miami fan. So, I mean,
Yeah, big time Miami fan.
That, like, I'm not huge on college football, but like I'm a Florida fan, so I'm gonna be biased towards like Torrance, you know, or other guys from the team, maybe even like Gervon Dexter. But I think that might be some of that. But Stevenson, I think he could go in the first round. I think he's a good enough player to do it, and I think as well, like he really stood out to me in the way he talked at the Senior Bowl. He seems like a very down-to-earth guy, a really good culture fit here, and someone who would be very willing to learn and play wherever it's needed. Because right now, we really don't know the long-term projection of a corner on this team, and maybe that's something that people could disagree with, but I think you could draft someone who's versatile and they play in the slot for several years, rather than just going outside after one season. Because if Darius Williams keeps improving like he was, we do have to consider he took a team-friendly deal to come here to play in Jacksonville. Yeah. This is where he wants to be. He signed on with the team over better offers, and he was one of the better corners as far as being able to lock down receivers late in the season. So I'm rooting for him to really carve out that role again this season and make it through his contract and stick around, because he's one of the guys I want to see stay with this franchise through it all, you know, through his career. But you never know too. I mean, Shaquille Griffin was someone we felt that way about, and then unfortunately just fell off a cliff this season for whatever reason that is.
Yeah, and it's very disappointing with what happened with Shaquille Griffin. I don't expect that same plateau from Williams. I do expect him to agree to a long-term extension following his contract year. Most likely a 2 to 3 year deal to finish out his playing career. He is a Jacksonville native. He came back home. He took a hometown discount to come play for the Jaguars. So I really do expect him to want to stay here and keep his family here and build in the community, and really just solidify himself as a Jaguar. Especially if we're able to win, he'll be one of those big time guys that'll be celebrated in the city. And I think he wants that.
Yep.
I think that has a lot of appeal, especially being a hometown kid.
Yeah, he's one of the people I would love to see hoisting a Lombardi trophy. Him, and obviously you got guys like Trevor Lawrence, maybe even Roy Robertson Harris, who took a cut to stay here as well. That's one
Hmm.
story that was kind of shocking this offseason, because I think for a lot of people who were looking at the cap, we thought, okay, that's an easy cut. Like, he's probably not going to take a cut. He's going to go somewhere else. And then all of a sudden, you hear, oh, it's 10 million, and that's per year, 30 million over 3 seasons. You think, oh wow, they paid him more. You look at the actual contract, which we'll show on here just so people can see. It was 7.2 million a year, which was a cut from what he took before. So you see the
Yeah.
cap numbers really team friendly, and not a whole lot in the void years. About what, 4 million over 2 seasons. So he'd be a guy I'd be thrilled to see hoisting Lombardi. Zay Jones would also be on that list. Tyler Shatley, maybe, if we want it really soon. But he's also getting older.
Yeah, Tyler Shatley is our longest recurring player on the roster. Very happy that we retained him as well for interior depth. I think that was a very glaring need coming into the offseason. Being able to retain him and move on. And we've added a few other pieces to that interior offensive line within the past 2 days. And I'm leaning towards us not making a selection of offensive line until the fourth round. I don't know how you feel about it currently.
Yeah, I don't think you have to pick offensive line in the first 3 rounds. And to be fair, I didn't think that before. I thought it was more so of, it's cool if you can. It'd be nice to
Hmm.
get a Torrance if that's the best selection, and
Yeah.
really just complete your offensive line. But Josh Wells, I don't know if I fully trust him as a swing tackle, but I could get behind it going into the season. I think he could step in. And as far as the other guy, I think that's being on the interior, probably not as big of an impact, because the interior has depth right now. Like, you have Tyler Shatley behind all these guys right now on the interior, and then you got Cole Van Lanen. So I think you've got that sitting there. But yeah, you would hope that you don't have as many injuries as it would take for him to be on the field, because you would lose 2 of your guys on the interior.
Yeah, I know a lot of Jags fans are really banking on the return and emergence of Ben Bart. I'm a big Bart believer. I think he had some stellar play within the beginning of the first half of the 2022 to 2023 season.
Yeah.
Um, I think he made hell. He opened up entire lanes for Travis Etienne. He played really well pass blocking. I think he was a much better run blocker than he was a pass blocker, but I think he made some excellent leaps in pass blocking. And I've seen a lot of the grades as far as the first half of the season last year in terms of who were the better guards. And no surprise, Brandon Scherf and Ben Barch were in the top portion of the NFL. So I think if you get him back healthy and he continues to work on his pass block, you may have one of the better projected guards, and you may be having a must resign following this year because I believe this is the last year on his contract.
Yeah, he's in his 4th year. And you do have a point. Like, he did play pretty well at the start of this last season until he got injured. And as long as injuries aren't a huge concern, I think he could be the long-term starter, but it is somewhat projection. You didn't see him too much as a starter on the team. He really took over in his third year. It was just for
Mhm.
part of the season. But what is impressive with it is you look at how he played against the Philadelphia Eagles. That was like his
Yes.
best game on the year. We'll look at it just to kind of verify that. Of course, it's PFF, so not everything's perfect on there, but yeah, against Philadelphia, highest grade of the year as a blocker. I think he's got potential. Important thing that just happened. I don't know if you've got the Twitter notification for this, but the first video of Calvin Ridley being thrown to by Trevor Lawrence just dropped for anyone who really cares about that, which I think is a fair amount.
Oh yeah, I'm very excited to watch that following the stream.
Yeah, I just caught it on my phone real quick, but yeah, it looked like they were all practicing for the off season, so that's pretty cool. Yeah, I'm excited for that. The offense is going to be really good this year. They've got a lot of pieces, and as long as people live up to the hype, they could be the best offense in the NFL.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of chatter about us being a top five offense in the NFL, and I believe those are realistic expectations right now
Yeah,
because you had a top 10 offense last year, as much as a lot of people would like to deny. We were ranked within the top 10. I believe we were in the 8 to 10 range. So you add Calvin Ridley to that, you retain Evan Ingram, still have your core pieces, and you may potentially improve on the offensive line. This is easily a potential top 10, top five, even the best offense in the NFL. I've heard a lot of chatter on ESPN as well that we can rival, the Cincinnati Bengals, the Kansas City Chiefs, and go toe to toe in these shootouts. Even the Buffalo Bills, if they continue to build through the draft as well.
yeah, the potential's definitely there. There's not really much of a weak spot. I think the only place I really look at as a potential concern is guard or just the general offensive line because of injury. But if everyone's fine and you don't have those problems, I think the run blocking's better right off the bat. That was one thing Ben Barch was, better at. I mean, even Cam Robinson. You're essentially from the playoffs swapping him out for Juwan Taylor, and he was a better run blocker than what Juwan Taylor was. So you're kind of improving in that part you want to, and you're getting players back on the offensive line. So they should be really good again. Now, we've got our pick coming up here. We've got two more selections. So we'll go ahead, if you're cool with it, and kind of look through this board. Somehow
Yeah,
Darnell Washington has fallen this far, which,
Luke Musgrave is falling too.
yeah, he just got taken. But,
Let me see.
yeah, we'll see. Tyreek Stevenson's off the board. So we've got Detroit Lions picking here. I hope they don't take Clark Phillips because that might be the route. Oh,
Yeah, I think right now, I think Clark Phillips
Brent's,
or a guy like Isaiah Foskey.
yeah,
I really like Foskey coming out of Notre Dame. I think he's an excellent selection. He was the best edge rusher in Notre Dame history in terms of sacks. I think he
yeah,
has a really nice pass rushing bag. He could be a very good designated pass rusher. Um, you can do a lot with him in stunts and continue to get pressure on the quarterback. He could fill very well into that Arden Key role. Has good length and a good projection here.
for sure. Now we've got him, we've got Clark Phillips, and we've got about 22 seconds left here. Tui Tuipulotu is on the board too. Derek Hall, Matthew Bergeron. I made the first selection technically, so I'll let you choose here who you'd like. But those are our options right now.
I think right now we need a slot right now, so let's go Clark Phillips.
Alrighty. Cool, cool. So we really hit Utah pretty hard here.
Yeah, we've hit Utah pretty hard.
Yeah, which I'm all good with. I think there is a legitimate route to where Utah ends up being the first two selections here because you got two players that could very well fit into this team, but
Hmm.
not necessarily the best options out of everyone who could possibly fall. But the way the draft's gone, we've had a lot of good players not available. A lot of
Yeah,
good guys that you expect to be there getting taken, and that's kind of the challenge with these two because you're not just battling against AI that picks like Tanner McKee at 27 or whatever stupid thing it is. But yeah, and you saw that run on corner there. That was the end of the class really until you get to like
Day 3, essentially.
previous. No, DJ Turner be the next guy, which he could have been a good
DJ
player
Turner.
too.
Yeah, DJ Turner was a good selection. I think Emmanuel Forbes did. Emmanuel Forbes go? I wasn't sure if he went yet.
I think he went early.
He went
went
early.
like
Okay.
early second round. We'll see.
Okay.
Yeah, 4th in the second round to the Indianapolis Colts. And yeah, I see this
Okay.
comment by Ben. That would be a really good draft too. Same positions. He's talking about getting Cam Smith and Darnell Washington in this if he was selecting. There would definitely be 2 really good players as well. I like Darnell Washington a lot too. I think he would be a fantastic pick for the team. My thing with him is I'm not sure he fits the mold of a Doug Peterson tight end as much. And I haven't really seen Doug Peterson value blocking tight ends. You know, it's probably part of the reason why Manhurts walked out the door for the same deal he had with the team before. You know, it's clear the team didn't really care to pay him what he was getting paid before.
Yeah. Yeah, more so. He really likes to work those 2 tight end folds where he can work one in line, work one in the slot. And I think you can work Kincaid in line and continue to use Ingram as this, this volatile weapon, whether it be outside in the slot. You can work him in the backfield like we've seen him do multiple times. I think he worked 27 snaps within the backfield. So I think it's a good draft so far with Kincaid and with Phillips. Phillips is an extreme ball hawk. I think he fits well within the slot. We get a little small within the DB room, but we continue to add another ball hawk. Very good as far as reading the quarterback. He's a playmaker, can play near the line of scrimmage, and he's very good in coverage deep. So I like his long speed.
Yeah, Phillips is a very complete guy outside of the size. Unfortunately, for a lot of guys in this class, size is the big problem. You look at the cornerback room that's available here. You know, even other guys like DJ Turner, though we could have considered pick. You know, DJ Turner is a smaller guy, not ideal length. Those things are working against him, and why he's not a bona fide first-round selection. Same for Clark Phillips. You're at 5'9". I think if Phillips had the size, he could be talked about, heck, as a top 20 prospect in this class.
Yeah.
That works against him. But still really good tape with him. I watched him play against Jordan Addison. He was really talented. In that game, you could really see that on film and went toe-to-toe with him. And yeah, Ben, for sure. I mean, Kincaid, he's not an inline guy. That's definitely the case. Now, his blocking capabilities are a little underestimated compared to what most people think about him as, but it's just really not what Doug Peterson looks for in tight ends. If they wanted to value that, Darnell Washington would be great, but I think they'd value the receiving ability of Kincaid. You just look at what we saw with Evan Ingram, how they used him. He's more of a receiver on the field, essentially.
Yeah.
You can almost make
and
an
like we
Doug
said,
Peterson doesn't care about tight ends because he just has more receivers, right?
exactly, more weapons for Trevor Lawrence.
Yeah.
And like you showed for Ingram, the breakdown on his usage, he was technically an inline tight end as well because his majority of his snaps were in line. I think you could see them work Kincaid in line and continue to flex Ingram outside and in the slot and work Kincaid in line because he's a willing blocker, the same way they tried to utilize Ingram as a willing blocker, chip block, and then run your route. Whether it's fade, it's a shallow, it's a crosser, you can continue to use Kincaid in that role and flex Ingram out to see if he can gain more yardage, continue to do more bubble routes, continue to do more things and create space for him, and kind of, create another advantage with Kincaid in line. So I'm not necessarily stating that he's an inline guy, but there's a lot of potential with what you can do with the playbook.
Yeah, it does really open it up, and it features a lot more of what Doug Peterson has done with his offenses. He has operated with 2 tight ends, and when that happened as well, it's important to note that he did have those guys in a pretty full-time role. We'll look at the numbers just to kind of show this. Zach Ertz, obviously one of the guys in Philadelphia at the time. And actually, if you're talking about Dalton Kincaid, who he's similar to, he's pretty much an identical copy of Zach Ertz as a player. He's about as close as it gets. I mean, even with the injuries, unfortunately. I would argue. The amount of snaps, say in 2018, because I think that was Goddard's first year, he was on the field for 1,100 snaps. And then Dallas Goedert, I think he was like 700, because I've looked at this before. Yes, about almost 800 snaps. So they've got both these guys on the field consistently. And they did have the problem eventually with their team where they just didn't want to play together because they were kind of limiting each other. But you still might not be keeping Ingram around past that next year. It might be all right. And maybe you do have Ingram become more of a receiver than a tight end. You feature him more in that role because you do consider these guys' roles were a little different after Doug Peterson left, and that's when Zach Ertz was traded, I believe. Wasn't it 2021 when he went to Arizona? It was the first year without Peterson, so... Yeah, we got Zach Kuntz being mentioned in the chat. He would be a really smart selection later in the draft. I think if they don't get in on tight end, that makes sense.
Yeah, I think I'll run that 3rd to 4th round range, especially with us having 2 4th round selections. I think if you can get them in the 4th, it's perfect value. Yeah. If you bite on them in the 3rd round, there must be a run on tight ends. You know, if we see a Kincaid and Mayer go early, and you see guys like Washington and Musgrave go in the 2nd round, you know, and maybe even a Shoemaker go in the late 2nd, you get a little concerned and you may say, hey, let's go Laporta or let's go Kuntz in the 3rd round.
Yeah, for sure. You might be forced into that pick a little earlier than you want. Now, I got a question for you here. We'll get into an interesting conversation and hopefully one that kind of brings up some players that aren't talked about as much for the Jaguars. Who is a player in this draft kind of around this range, like late 2nd round to end of the draft, that you like for the Jaguars that maybe isn't as popular as other players or not talked about as much?
For me right now, I really like Derek Hall out of Auburn.
Yeah.
I really like his game. Really good edge rusher. Perfect size for what Balky looks for in an edge rusher. Good bend. Really good athleticism. I believe he ran a 4.5, 4.4 in the late 4.4s, I believe. So he's a really athletic, fast guy. I really like him. I've seen a lot of him more so in the 3rd round. I've been kind of mocking him in the 2nd round. I believe that's more of his projection. So I think that late 2nd round range makes a lot of sense for Derek Hall. What's another guy that you've been looking into?
For me, I think there's a lot of guys I like a lot around that range that are more popular, more talked about to Jacksonville, like Xavier Hutchinson maybe. You can talk about even a Kenny McIntosh or Wanya Morris, maybe more Lajamo. But one player that I really like that may not be talked about to Jacksonville at all is Chris Smith from Georgia. I think, while he does not have the greatest athletic profile for the position, he's very similar to Andre Sisco in the sense that he can make big plays. He is a very instinctual player. He's going to create turnovers. I think he is a little less risky with it. More so, he doesn't lose as often as what Sisco did coming out of college. And Sisco's really improved in that regard. He's not the same player he was. But Smith kind of offers that, again, in your secondary. And while he doesn't have the perfect size to play like strong safety, where he would probably have to take over at some point, strong safeties are kind of required to be really good against the run. And Chris Smith can play really well against the run. He is a very intelligent player in this draft class. I have him kind of ridiculously high on my board. I'll be honest, probably a little higher than anyone else. He's like 40th for me. Yeah, 40th.
Oh, you have him a lot higher than I do.
Yeah, and
He's one of your guys for sure.
I don't know if I'd take him in the second round because I think you'll have a better player on the board than him. But he's one that I would be thrilled if Jacksonville moved up, into the early third or trade back into the early third and went and selected. Because I think you get a replacement for Rayshawn Jenkins there. You can also start him in the slot. That's another important thing to factor in with him. He can play there. And you get someone who's just a really underrated fit into Jacksonville for the defense, and you get a lot smarter on that end. Now you're being asked by one guy in here, it's Julian again. He's asking about your opinion on I think it's Henry Bainivalu.
Yeah.
Late round selection, I know that.
Let me see.
So if you don't have notes on him, I don't blame you because I am not that far.
No, I have notes on him. He's an interior lineman.
Yeah.
Believe he's going to most likely play left guard in the NFL. Very good in pass protection. I believe he's a little undersized right now at the moment. Let me look into him a little bit more. But I know he's a very good pass blocker. He's more of a day 2, early day 3 guy. But he is going to play offensive guard. He could bring a lot of depth to the position and potentially push Ben Barch for that starting spot. I'm more so looking at him as a left guard prospect. He's 6'6", 306, big hands, with 10 inch and 3/4. He didn't test extremely well athletically, but he has a good 10-yard split at 1.87 for a guard, and then he has 34-inch arms, so he's really long. He has the potential to be a really good player. I do think he's a better pass blocker than run blocker, which in terms of what you have in Jacksonville with Trevor Lawrence, you may lean that way if you want a better pass blocker than Ben Barch. But I'm really more so looking for balance within that left guard spot.
Yeah.
And I don't think that he's creating enough running lanes for a guy like Travis Etienne. So I wouldn't take him earlier than, say, the 3rd or 4th round. But I do think if you get him at 121, he's good value.
Yeah, and I know Walk the Mock has him pretty low, which it's essentially based off of some random guy's opinions, whoever runs it, because unlike like the NFL mock draft database where it's the average for all the players, this is based off of one guy. And so you get some crazy ones, like even Xavier Hutchinson, like being a 4th round prospect, where quite frankly, I think we all know he's going before the end of the 3rd because he's a wide receiver. And we saw these guys go probably in the early 2nd this last year. But yeah, he was one guy I think I picked him a few times. I know very little about him, but he could be one of your sneaky interior offensive linemen. But like you said, balance is good there. We have an offensive line that this last year, while it was really good at pass blocking, was not balanced enough, and it really hurt the run game and not really wasted a season for ETN, but limited a season for him. Made things harder on him and limited what kind of player he can be. And so I hope they are able to either address that externally with a big draft pick like Torrance, or you just see Ben Barch take another step forward, stay healthy, and the rest of the offensive line doesn't get injured, because these guys that they have now all have the ability to improve. I think here for a second, okay, he's back now. He just got disconnected for a second, but yeah, I was pretty much done with my point there.
We're good.
You're good. No worries. We got Gervon Dexter off the board here.
Gervon Dexter's gone. Let me see. And I see in the chat that Julian's asking about Xavier Hutchinson or Trey Palmer. That'll give us a little opportunity to talk about this wide receiver class as well.
Oh, yeah.
I have Xavier Hutchinson as my best fit on the Jacksonville Jaguars.
I agree.
Not necessarily the best value, but I believe he is the best fit as far as a Marvin Jones Jr. replacement. I think he has everything you need in terms of a long-term wide receiver for this wide receiver core. He has the size at about 6'3". I believe he's about 215, 220. He has the weight, he has the size, he has the arm length, he has the catch radius. He's an efficient route runner. He's a Jacksonville native. I'm sure he
I
would
love
love to
that
come
part.
home. Yes, he's a Jacksonville native. I believe he went to Bartram Trail High School. So he is, a really good guy that if you can bring him home, bring him home. If you get this guy in the third round, I would be ecstatic. Even if you get him in the third or fourth round, I would be jumping out of my seat praising Trent Baalke for that selection because if you look at our wide receiver room, yes, we have one of the better wide receiver rooms in the league, but we also have one of the more expensive wide receiver rooms in the league. So, in terms of how you look at it long term, yes, you want to continue to be able to pay these guys and invest in the position, but you also want to be able to get guys that can contribute on smaller contracts. So if you can get a guy like Xavier who could be a building block for the future, say Ridley doesn't work out, or you decide to move on from, say, Jones after a year or two further, you have a guy like Xavier Hutchinson who can step in and be a potential wide receiver 2 or 3 and give you that big body, catch radius possession guy and can really make plays for you down the field as well.
100%. I couldn't agree more with that. I mean, it's essentially just echoing my own thoughts on him as well. And value you do find in selections in the draft is giving you the ability to move on from players that get more expensive if needed. And well, I don't necessarily see Xavier Hutchinson as someone who will next season, if he's selected in this draft, replace like Zay Jones. I think it's more likely Zay stays here and Calvin Ridley
Mhm.
stays here. It's still a nice option to have because you're not looking at like, oh man, Zay Jones didn't perform well in 2023, but we don't have anyone to play behind him. What do we do? It gives you
Yeah.
options. It lets you make smarter decisions. It's the same thing with the Dalton Kincaid pick. Well, it may not be the best pick we could have in the first round. I think in this scenario it was, but still, it kind of gives you the option to move on from Ingram if you need it. And so that's nice about getting Xavier Hutchinson here and the role he offers. Because he's not even just an outside receiver, he's also a guy who comes into the slot. He can play that big slot role. He's your contested catch guy, like you were saying. I could absolutely see him coming in the red zone for this team and making big grabs. He's a really impressive player and also tested out the combine as a more impressive athlete than people expected. So I think he should be picked in the second round by a team.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of projection with him in the past few days. A lot of increased talk about him and another guy in Jonathan Mingo who's moving up
Yeah.
boards. I do think Xavier Hutchinson is worthy of being a day two selection. I think he has the tape. I think he has the production. If you look at that tape, he is their entire offense. And I think if that's the type of guy that you're getting in on day two, that can be a potential building block for the future on your offense, that is the perfect way to execute it because if he's already shown he can be a focal point and be a guy that can make catches on the sideline, he can make catches down in the red zone, he can be a big red zone target. We need to continue to add to the weaponry. And, just to start talking about potential wide receivers, we also, I believe there was a rumor that we interviewed JSN and had him come in for a top 30 visit.
Yeah.
So we do know that they're looking into the wide receiver position, and they had a top 30 visit with Quentin Johnston. So wide receiver is not out of the question on any selection.
Yeah, and I wouldn't be mad even if this team took one in the first round, as long as it's a really good prospect. But yeah, Xavier Hutchinson is a really smart fit for the team. He just, in so many ways, makes sense for the organization to bring in. And it's hard for me to find really any reason that doesn't make sense, other than like if you have to trade up in the second round to go get him. Maybe at that point then you're considering, do we really want to do that? Is he worth that value? But with where he's projected right now, he'd be a really nice pickup. And I'm kind of getting the feeling that we know where we're going at this next pick based off of that talk. But we'll definitely look through the board too and see if anyone else is kind of falling here.
Yeah, what are we looking like on the edge class right now? What's it looking? How's it shaping up?
So we have best guy available according to these rankings. Oh man, I got to scroll a while. Zach Pickens, he's not edge though. Jacqueline Roy, not edge. Carl Brooks, Byron Young. I think one of
Carl,
these.
Carl, Carl Brooks is a pretty good 3 tech if we want an interior pass rusher.
Yeah.
Um,
Man, I don't know.
he was a big
KJ Henry.
Senior Bowl winner. KJ Henry, I like him in the 4th round, so it looks like we might be going Xavier Hutchinson here or Cedric Tillman. He's one of my top fits right here. You still have A.T. Perry here. This is a very good wide receiver class, a very underrated one. You know, every year we talk about, oh man, this is a really good wide receiver class. We have a very underrated class here in 2023. And a lot of guys like Xavier Hutchinson, Cedric Tillman, who's being overshadowed by Jalen Hyatt. I believe Tillman is the better prospect.
100%.
I've seen a lot of talk about that, but I think he is the better prospect. I think Tillman is a fit here. A.T. Perry is a very good fit here, reminiscent of A.J. Green, in my opinion. And Xavier Hutchinson, like we talked about, reminiscent of Marvin Jones Jr. So you have a very good and deep class here that can go all the way down to the 4th round.
Yeah, what's so weird about the class 2 at receiver is so many of these top guys are like slot-only candidates, at least how most people see them. You look at like even the 1st round, like Quinn Johnston's your one big guy, right? And then Jordan Addison, I think he could play outside. Some people talk about him not having enough size to do that. Jackson Smith and Jigba, obviously a guy who's played in the slot pretty much his whole career. You know, hasn't moved outside yet. He can do that at some point, I think, but not right now. Like, he's got to have time there. Zay Flowers. I think he could play outside, but he's more of a fit for the slot. You go down the board even more with Josh Downs, Jalen Hyatt, who I wouldn't have ranked that high, but that's generally where he's at. They just don't have the size to be outside. And Xavier Hutchinson is one of those first guys that actually has that also is a pretty balanced athlete, I think.
Yeah. And to me, I don't know how you felt in the 2021 draft class, but my biggest talk of the town was Andre Cisco and Amon-Ra St. Brown. If we weren't talking about Trevor Lawrence, I was talking about those 2 prospects. And to see Amon-Ra St. Brown just obliterate us in that Detroit game was just proof of everything that I needed to tell everybody on Twitter. So right now, I would really regret not taking Xavier Hutchinson.
Well, I think we're going to be taking him here in a sec for sure. And yeah, I hated it for the Jaguars losing that game, but my fantasy team loved it that week because I had Amon-Ra St. Brown.
I had him on right this year too.
Yeah, that was a guy I circled early on. I was like, I am getting this man at all costs. Like, he's going to be on my team because they were talking about him being like the #1 threat on the Lions offense in training camp, and he wasn't moving up the boards. He wasn't being talked about. I watched him with Jared Goff in like the preseason. It's like, this guy looks like he's about to break out. And so anyone who got Amon-Ra St. Brown last year was thrilled, you know, aside from when he was injured. But
he's just a target machine.
Yeah, he really is. And Eli Ricks there. So other name I would have considered here, Chris Smith, but we don't gotta go that route. I think you could definitely go Xavier Hutchinson. Is that the route you want to go here off this board?
I'll let you make the selection. I don't know how you feel about the edge class shaping up right here. And we kind of addressed the slot position, so I don't think Quan Martin is the right selection here.
Yeah.
So either Xavier Hutchinson or an edge makes the most sense.
I would have gone Chris Smith or Xavier Hutchinson. I could have argued Chris Smith for myself at this point because I think you could trade up for Xavier. But it's killer. I'll let you decide. and we'll see how this falls. I know I'm just putting
Cedric
it out
Tillman on
here.
the board. Let's go. Let's go Xavier. I feel more comfortable with him as a
All right,
prospect.
man, we are
Cedric's had a
really
few injuries.
yeah
We are loading up for Trevor.
we're loading up for Trevor, and we're also at the same time coming really close to missing our selections. But that's all right. I mean, take all the time you need as long as you don't take over the 2 minutes on here, or 1 minute it is, I think. But yeah, Xavier, really good pick in the 3rd round. It does. This is kind of like the 1st round where it kills you to miss a certain prospect, right? Like there's a lot of good names on the board that you would love to have down here. Chris Smith is one of them. Maybe you could look at making a trade for a guy like that. But I also want to make sure if we're making any trades, it's someone we both really like for the team. So
Yeah.
we'll kind of see how this falls. So what do you
Yeah.
want to do with these last 2 selections? Because this is probably the last ones we'll make for the night.
Yeah, I think looking at these last 2 selections in the 4th round, I think it makes sense to go edge and then swing tackle. Because I don't know if we'll go guard again, especially with the addition of Brewer earlier today, Chase Brewer.
What
Um,
about Voorhees?
Voorhees could be interesting, but he is coming off an ACL tear at the combine.
Yeah.
One guy that I would really look into that I don't think many people will be looking at would be Chandler Zavala. He is a interior offensive lineman out of North Carolina State. He just had a phenomenal combine. Um, well, not necessarily combine, a pro day at North Carolina State. I believe probably about 2, 3 days ago. And NFL scouts were stating that he should have been, he is the one player that they said should have been invited to the combine that wasn't. And his testing as an interior offensive lineman was off the charts. And I had been watching his film before his pro day, and I really had been on to him since Jordan DeLugo mentioned him about 2 months ago. And I looked into him. I've really been mocking him on a lot of my mocks recently because I think you can get a lot of value out of him. He's really essentially a day 3 guy. But after that pro day, he may just slip into day 2. So
Yeah.
with us going into the 4th round, I think at pick 121, I'm looking at him. And then at
Where's he at on
127, I'm
here?
looking at edge. He may be very low.
Oh
He's going
boy.
to be an interior offensive lineman.
He's just inside the 7th round on here, which is fine.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't matter where they're ranked on here. It matters the value of the player and who's better. I mean, I think the perfect example of that is the pick we just made here. Because if
Yeah.
we're trying to game this and we want Chris Smith and Xavier Hutchinson, say we like agreed on that, then
Mhm.
we're picking Chris Smith because Xavier Hutchinson's far down the board and he's going to be harder to see for people, right? And maybe we just make a
Mhm.
small trade. But we picked Xavier Hutchinson here because we're being more realistic about it, choosing the player we value more. And so, like with Zavala, if we see him around that area, then that's fine to make that selection and go reach for him. Nothing wrong with that. So he's a guy I do need to look at now for me because I have not looked into him too much. I heard the hype about him a little bit, but
Mhm.
I don't know much on him.
Yeah,
So
Zavala is a really excellent guard prospect. I think that he is a great day 3, early day 3 selection. If you get him day 2, if the Jaguars take him in the 3rd round this year, I would be completely fine with that because
yeah,
of the way he's trending upward as far as a prospect. He has great tape. He was just a very underrated player as far as coming out of a school like North Carolina State that doesn't necessarily get a ton of draft coverage. Really, essentially, why he wasn't invited to the combine. So after they watched him at his pro day, they noticed his athletic profile. It increased his stock, and now he's being looked at as a potential day 2 guy. So you jump from being a 6th round target to being a potential round 3 target. You know what I mean?
yeah, that's a nice
So
jump. I mean, a lot of players do that around this time of year anyway. Like you saw Anthony Richardson go from a guy that people were like, "Why the heck is he coming out this class?" It's stupid.
Hmm.
He's probably going to go in the early second, miss out on tons of money. He needs to stay around. To now, all of a sudden, everyone's like, he's at least going in the top 4. There's no way he's falling outside the top 4 just because he could be great. And I
Yeah.
actually understand why a team would select him there. I would understand why the Panthers would do it. Now, they could very much screw up that pick, but I could at least get it. But
Hmm.
you see that with players where they move all around. And looking at this profile I brought up on him, it's kind of interesting. You look at the weaknesses on him, it is not much of anything. I mean, this is nitpicks. This is from NFL Draft Buzz, which is, I think, a more recent one, more up to date. I think they update theirs quite often. Their weaknesses for him are has enough power in the run game, but at times Zavala seems to lack a mean streak. Too bad, so sad. Can struggle to stay engaged, especially on the second level. His hand placement can be sloppy, costing him power. Okay, you work on hand placement. Not a big deal. And the final one is could be a liability against speed to power rushers, pass rushers, that is, early in his career. Really not a huge deal.
Yeah, but again, that's something to develop.
Yeah, you can fix that.
So
Like, that's not like, oh, he's 4 inches shorter than he should be for the position, or this guy needs to put on 40 pounds. It's nothing like that. It's just these simple things that he can work on. So yeah, I could definitely get making a selection like that. So he's a player we'll definitely look at for that next pick. Other guys on the board we could consider here. I think maybe Skinner keeps falling just because of the injury, and you go get yourself a strong safety. I'm not huge on him, but I mean, in the 4th round, you could get nice value. I like Hodges Tomlinson.
he's a very interesting selection. Do you
It's
think you
his
double down
size
on,
again, though.
on corner right there, though? On
Yeah,
especially smaller corners?
yeah, that's the problem. Like, if you don't get Clark Phillips there, I could take Hodges Tomlinson, but it's size again. So
Yeah.
you're continuing to get smaller in the room. I think he's even smaller than what Clark Phillips is.
Yeah,
So
he's about 5'8", 180.
yeah, he is really, really small for the position. And there he goes. So we don't even gotta worry about it, right? It's almost like they can hear us or something. But man, as far as other guys, you said A.T. Perry. Obviously got Hutchinson though, so he is off the board. Michael Wilson's another receiver. A lot of people like. K. McIntosh was a running back I'd like as a threat, but I wouldn't.
Hmm.
He wouldn't be a top option for me. So yeah, I would probably throw Voorhees into the conversation, and then maybe Wanya Morris, just as far as
Yeah,
other
I
offensive
really like
linemen.
Wanya Morris.
Yeah, I've got him as like a 3rd round selection right now.
Yeah, I like him as a swing tackle and then a potential right tackle if we move on from Cam Robinson.
Yeah, he's the exact kind of player you would like to bring in to develop at tackle, to where he doesn't have to start right off the bat. And if you have to start him because of an injury, it's not ideal, but you can do it. You can get away with it. And this is a team that also doesn't require the greatest tackle play. So I think it could be a good fit for that reason. Now, so we're talking about Voorhees here, Morris, and Zavala. Now, where would you kind of rank those guys together? You still kind of have Zavala as your top guy?
Due to the injury of Voorhees, I was a very big Voorhees guy before the injury, and I wouldn't be afraid to select him in the 4th round per se. I wouldn't take him day 2, but I wouldn't
Yeah.
be afraid to do it on day 3. But with that ACL injury, he's more likely not going to be able to help you until possibly the postseason. That's more so about a year injury, a year-long injury to recover from. So he wouldn't be able to help you in his rookie year until you're in the postseason. And at that point, you kind of have some synergy and some chemistry with your O line if you remain healthy. And I don't think that at that point he would take Ben Bartch's spot, especially if he's had a good year. So I wouldn't want to invest that 4th round selection in him unless you're projecting that he's the replacement if Ben Barch leaves this year. So I'm seeing Ben say Blake Freeland. I'm not a
Yeah,
big Blake Freeland guy.
kind of the
Me
same here.
personally, yeah, giving
He
up
did.
too many sacks.
He just
Um,
got taken as well, right as he mentioned him, unfortunately.
by San Francisco, and that's a good developing system for him. I think he could be a very good swing tackle in the NFL, but I don't project him as a starting left or right tackle in the NFL. I think he could have a long career if he cleans up his feet and his hand placement. I think his footwork is a little off. I think he gets knocked off by power too often, and I don't think that he's the best against speed rushers. So there's not really a strength in his game for me. I think he has really long arms, a really nice frame. I think he has good athleticism to work with. He has tools. I won't say that he's not a good prospect, but I don't think that he's prepared to make an impact for you at the NFL level.
Yeah, I don't see him as an immediate starter for sure. I think that maybe you can get him around this range in the fourth round, but he's not one of my must get tackle guys in this class.
Yeah.
I would still have Wanya Morris over him because of the
Hmm.
size and more. I think the tools are a little better with him, but that's kind of where I'm at on Freeland. He wasn't someone who really impressed me a ton on film, but I think with watching film too, especially because I didn't get to watch like too many games on each prospect because I started doing my big board pretty late, and I'd seen some of them, but like I watched a limited amount of film, so it's always possible like I just chose games that didn't really work in favor of prospects. I mean, the big example I mentioned earlier was Julius Brents. Like, probably chose one of the worst games for him, and I tried to take that into account, but it was so bad that like, you know, without watching like a bunch more on him, where maybe he proves me wrong, like he doesn't seem like a fantastic prospect to me, or at least not someone I want to pick like in the second round. Well, a lot of people are talking about him in the first, but
Yeah.
maybe the same thing with Blake Freeland.
Looking at the board that we have a little bit right here, of
Mora
course, I'm a
Jama.
Zavala guy. I like Mora Ojama. I like, let's see, I like Keandre Coburn. I like Yaya Diaby.
Yeah.
Nick Broker is a very interesting prospect to me. He's more of a projection to go as a guard in the NFL. Um, I think he's more of a interior lineman. I think if you really want to challenge Ben Barch, you could go Nick Broker here. Multiple sport athlete, has insane athleticism for the position. 6'7", can play tackle or guard. Good hand placement, can get out to the second level. I think he is an interesting prospect to work with, and I think whenever you have a guy that's a two sport or three sport athlete and it can translate to another sport, I think you obviously would love to bank on the athleticism that they have. I think Broker has a lot of potential, and he could be a starting guard in the NFL for a long time. That's how I felt about him after his evaluation. I think he is an early day three guy, so it would make sense to take him here. Um, so right now I am trending towards going online here, just with how the selections have gone.
Yeah.
I
Good
think you
board.
can get like, yeah, like you can get like a KJ Henry or a Yaya Diaby at 127. Just depends how the edges fall here in the early fourth. But I think you can go interior offensive lineman and then edge here in this fourth round.
Yeah, and that's the one part we really haven't hit yet because with the way the board's fallen and the picks have been very clear. I think so far than maybe the first selection was probably the
Hmm.
most questionable, especially because there was limited time to adjust to so many good players going off the board right before. But we really haven't hit the trenches once. We hit the tight end position. We hit wide receiver. So like the offense is amazing. I think after this, as far as just offensive weapons, it's ridiculous. And then you got Clark
Yeah.
Phillips at corner as your slot guy. So
Yeah, kind of completing that DB room.
yeah, you've really completed about every room outside of your trenches. That's the only thing you
Hmm.
really have left to hit at this point, I would say. So, I mean, offensive line is a logical one because I think there you really need to add a little more depth, whereas on the defensive line you need to as well. But I think it's easier to get guys in free agency, like getting Dewan Smoot back or bringing in a guy like Justin Houston. The
Yeah.
even Melvin Ingram, I think, is out there. Like just getting an older guy who will sign on for a cheap deal and be effective. So offensive line definitely seems like a smart direction with this. I see the Baltimore. Oh no, they traded back for that one. So Indy moved up to get someone, Carl Brooks. So A.T. Perry's off the board there. Now, if you guys got any questions, doesn't have to just be talking about this part of the draft, but anything, regarding first round or anything before if you want. It could be other topics as well. Definitely throw them in. Um, we'll have probably about 10 minutes or so till our next selection, and then we'll wrap this up after that. But really would love talking anything about the draft. But yeah, we definitely hit some good offensive line prospects at this point.
Yeah, and I think this is where the real meat and bones of the offensive line class are. I think a lot of people are very in tune with what's going on in the first round, but really the fourth round is where you really can get interesting with what's there depth wise, whether it be at tackle or interior if offensive lineman. Another guy that I really love is McClendon Curtis. We brought him in for a top 30 visit.
Yeah,
He had a great season at Chattanooga. He can play tackle. He can play guard. 6'6" size. I believe he's about 270. I can look into his profile a little bit more, but he is a phenomenal prospect. I think that he could be a starter, possibly immediately. He has the size, the hand placement, the length, the athletic profile to come in and really make an impact. He can impact the passing game and as well as the run game. He's 6'6", 35-inch arms, 10 and a quarter inch hands, 324 pounds. And he had a really good athletic testing. It was eighth among guards. So he's the ninth ranked guard on the NFL's board on NFL Network with a 1.85 10-yard split. So he has a strong get off.
that's really
He
high.
ran, that's really high.
Yeah,
It's really
compared to
high.
where I've seen him. That's good.
So I think he's a really good selection here in the fourth round as well. I think this is the perfect spot to really take an offensive lineman. I know a lot of people are tied in with Torrance, but I think you can find some really good value on day three on the offensive line.
Yeah, there are a lot of prospects at those positions deep in the draft that you could go after. Ben's asking here as well about some late round favorites. That would definitely be one. McClendon Curtis. He'd be a right guard, right? That's where he's played, correct? Chattanooga.
Um, Out of Chattanooga, he played. Let me look into it. He's played tackle as well, but he played right guard and left tackle. So he can play left guard if you have him running in that 3-point stance. Because more so, if you can play right guard, you can play left guard, in my opinion.
Yeah,
It's a little bit of a transition just with the hand placement, but in terms of what you're really doing, it's not that much of a difference as say a right tackle moving to left tackle. So from that interior standpoint, and he's ran in a stance from the left side at left tackle in the final 7 games of their season last year. So he can align on the left hand side.
yeah, and that fits what the Jaguars won this draft too, because they've talked about versatility a lot. So that makes even more sense. Another player we can throw in to the topic of some late round favorites, I think, would be Zach Kuntz. Talked about him earlier. Tight
Hmm.
end that has a fantastic athletic profile. We look at the mock draftable on him here. Every single one of these among the best. Worst one's weight. He's still in like the top 40% there. And outside of that, it's like the bench press where he's top fourth. So very
Yeah.
physically gifted tight ends that you're putting him in offense with Doug Peterson leading it, someone who's been fantastic at developing tight ends. You're getting a really good fit making that kind of move, and I would call that the great value selection at tight end if you aren't able to hit on one of these top four guys. Who are some other late round favorites that you've got?
A recent guy that we brought in for interview and a top 30 visit was Terrell Smith out of Minnesota.
Yep.
Long armed corner, great long speed. Um, I think he has the athletic profile to be a long term NFL player. Let me go and look into his measurements a little bit
Sure.
from Minnesota. And I think that he's just a fantastic prospect. I was very excited to see that we had brought him in. He's a great day three value. I think that he has the the athletic testing is off the charts. He ranked 10th among cornerbacks, which is very good. He has a 4.41 40-yard dash, a 1.5 10-yard split, which is insane. A 4.3 20-yard shuttle, 7.023 cone drill, and from an athletic testing point, it's just off the charts. I mean, this guy is 6 foot, 204, 32 and 7/8 inch arms with 9 inch hands. Like he has huge hands for a corner. You know, the way that he can get in there and cause those PBUs, it's just the production there could be very good. And like we said, we don't want to get smaller in our DB room. So he has a similar frame to a guy like Tyson Campbell as well. So if this is a guy that you want to take in the fourth or potentially trade up into the fifth round, um, it makes a lot of sense, to be that understudy for Darius Williams.
Yeah, he is probably my favorite corner at this point in the draft as we get past the fourth round. I would definitely consider bringing him in. I'd be very happy with that as a late selection if they brought him into Jacksonville. A lot of the same reasons as you're mentioning on him. As far as other prospects for me, not sure I have any others I'm huge on. I thought Trey Tucker was a bit better when people had him ranked, but obviously size is a huge problem with him. But hey, it's like the problem with every receiver this draft, it seems like.
Yeah.
And then you've also got one guy who's just fallen off a cliff recently that I get some of the reason, but I don't think he should be as low as he is right now in the community is Trey Dean from Florida. He was being talked
Hmm.
about as a third round selection, and a strong safety they could bring in. And now we're talking about him not even going drafted because of a bad combine performance. And I don't think that's warranted. I get like dropping around or moving around a little bit, but if he's sitting there late in the draft, that could be a nice pick just to add some more depth. And you also have some guys who are potentially going to be moved on from at some point. Daniel Thomas will eventually get to the end of his rookie deal. That's going to be one safety you'll move on from. Maybe Rayshawn Jenkins. And at that point, you really just got Andre Sisco, Andrew Wingard, and then probably another safety you're bringing in to start. I don't know if Trey Dean's a starter for your team at any point, but could be a really good depth player for that point of the draft.
Yeah.
That's probably about it for me
Yeah.
off this list.
I'm trying to look into the prospect list that I'm looking at from the NFL Combine as far as really what's on the board right now. I believe KJ Henry is still on the board. Am I right?
KJ Henry is, yeah.
Okay. KJ Henry is a potential guy, especially on early day three. I really like him in the late rounds. I love his production, whether it be run stuffing or pass rushing. I think he brings a lot of what you're potentially losing in Dewan Smoot. I would love to retain Dewan Smoot, but if you are losing him in free agency or just not able to retain him this year due to the injury and coming to terms on what the guarantees will be, I think that KJ Henry is a great consolation prize. I think he brings everything and more that Dewan Smoot can bring. He may not be the playmaker in terms of making those timely sacks that we're so used to from Smoot.
Yeah.
But I think that he has the same athletic profile. He has the same build. He can set the edge similar to Smoot, and he can get after the pass rush, whether you're doing stunts or doing some fire zone blitzes. So I really like him here in the fourth round. A couple of other guys that I like. Julian might like this one. Jose Ramirez out of Eastern Michigan. He's an interesting edge. Kind of want to get into this edge class later on day 3 a little bit. Ramirez was a very interesting prospect coming out of Eastern Michigan. 6'2 size, 242, 32 and 3/4 inch arms. You know, not necessarily the biggest athlete, but he has a pretty strong athletic testing as well. 4.73 40-yard dash, 1.63 10-yard split for an edge. Pretty good. Has 21 bench reps for the bench press, and 6.95 3-cone drill, which is very impressive. So he had a pretty good athletic testing. And I think that he could be a really good backup if you're able to bring him in here as a designated pass rusher, kind of in that Arden Key role. He may not have the length of Arden Key, but I think he can create the pressure that Arden Key was able to bring.
And that pressure was the most important part to Arden Key's game late in the year, because it's not a guy you're really looking at the stat sheet and saying, oh, okay, that's his impact. Like, he had 4.5 sacks for the team. But you saw him get consistent pressures in big moments that led to turnovers for the team. It led to some of the victories. So getting pressure is more important than, what some people consider it. Even like that was a conversation with Josh Allen at one point, because he wasn't getting a lot of sacks. There was a whole point where he couldn't get a sack for like a month or 2, I think. And you still saw like plays where, say against Lamar Jackson, he's chasing him down, forces a throwaway, and that's a field goal. If he doesn't do that, the team doesn't win that game. But that's not a sack still. It's not going to show up on the stat sheet. So pressures are really important. We got 3 guys here named Zach going back to back, all with different spellings of their names. That's pretty cool. Kind of a bizarre little thing. We've got 3 selections until we pick again here. So if you guys in the chat got anyone you like, you want to throw out, definitely throw them out. For yourself, off this board, I'll just kind of scroll through, and then we've got Zavala, who's like way down the board on here, so we won't see him. But who would be like your top guy at this point, you think?
I like Nick Herbig. He's going to be more of an edge. Isaiah McGuire, he's an edge as well that I like. Wanya Morris and KJ Henry, we've talked about them a little bit.
Yeah.
Dylan Horton is a nice edge as well.
And probably Yaya Diaby, Nick Broker.
You talk
about
DJ Johnson. It's a lot of edge talent here. I think if we go interior offensive lineman, I'm going to let you decide. Do you want to go interior offensive lineman, or you want to go edge first?
Let's go interior offensive lineman. So who do you think would be the highest or most talented player on the board for this selection? Who's available? We talked about McClendon Curtis. I think we talked a little about Henry Bainivalu. And then
we talked about him a little bit.
And there might be some guys classified as OT that aren't on that. Yeah, like maybe a Nick Broker.
Yeah, Nick Broker. I also like Ryan Hayes here as a swing tackle.
Yeah.
But right now, I really just want to go with a potential starting left guard or somebody that can push for that third guard.
Sure.
Yeah, I really like Chandler Zavala here. I think he's a riser. I don't think he's going to get out of the 4th round this year. That could be a very interesting selection. So I probably would go Zavala. And if Zavala gets taken somehow by the Steelers, if they know something that we know, I would go Nick Broker, if not for Zavala.
Alrighty. Yeah, I'm good with that pick for sure, especially off what I heard about Zavala. And he'll be a player I try to watch some film on here before the draft. Um, Guys I would also be considered him definitely would be Andrew Voorhees just for the long-term investment. I like Morris as a
Mhm.
swing tackle. But if you're getting a guy to challenge for left guard at this point in the draft, that's really good. And yeah, Zavala did not go off the board, so we got our guy here. So there we go. So finally hit the trenches here, and I think really every pick on here you got a really talented player so far. You've got really
Yeah.
good quality for all these selections. You know, it may not have been exactly how you wanted the board to fall, but we still found really good prospects and really raised the floor on this team and the ceiling. I think both of them for sure. You know,
Yeah.
with the offensive weapons, I think you've really done exactly what the offense would like to have added on. You know, aside from like, you know, drafting maybe Jackson Smith and Jigba in the first round, but you're getting a good tight end for the offense. The way they operate, Xavier Hutchinson's probably the best fit in this class of receiver, and then you get a guy to challenge for left guard. And on the defense, you know, we get our slot corner. Wasn't Brian Branch, but still got a pretty nice consolation prize in the second round.
Oh yeah, and I think for me, like Clark Phillips is a worthy candidate to be the number one option as our second round selection. You know, if
Yeah,
you're not going edge in the second round, you have to look at guys like Jartavius Martin and Clark Phillips and say, hey, you know, if we can't get Brian Branch, we're getting the next best thing. You know, you're getting some physicality, you're getting a playmaker, you're getting, you know, ball production, you know, you're getting pass breakups, you're getting interceptions. You're going to get that out of both of those guys.
yeah, they're both really good playmakers. I like adding them on to this team. Um, it would have been nice to get an edge rusher by, you know, before this point in the draft. I still think you can get someone talented there, but it's just still, you know, aside from really that defensive line, you're hitting about everything on the team at this point in the draft. You know, you've got your tight end of the future, you've got slot corner, you've got receiver, and you've helped the salary cap as well in doing this. Because
Yeah.
now with these selections, you can move on from Evan Ingram if you need to. You know, you could even
Hmm.
argue like Trey Herndon doesn't have to come back. That's not a lot of money, but it's something. You know, probably not a strong argument, but Xavier Hutchinson, you look at him as someone who might be a starter his second year, depending on how things go. Not that I expect it, but it's possible. And then
Yeah.
with Chandler Zavala, you might have your starter at left guard. It's possible, and if that's the case, then maybe you don't have to re-sign Ben Barch. You have a better player, and you're saving money. But it depends on how it goes. This is more so just talking about hypotheticals and what you could get out of this class. And you finally get
Exactly.
yourself to a point where the salary cap's good.
Yeah.
Mission complete.
Yeah, and I think the way that the board has fallen, I think the way that the Jags are definitely going to be approaching this draft class is we're going to take the best player available. You know, we don't necessarily have a need for offensive line depth anymore. We've addressed that. We have a potential swing tackle. We have a potential challenger and guard. We have some good guys on the interior that can't even step outside, like a Blake Hance, or even, you know, we just got Brewer. He can play tackle as well. So, you know, and you have Shatley still there. He can play guard and center. So you have a lot of versatility in the depth of this offensive line. And Josh Wells can play left and right tackle and be your swing tackle as well. Although he's coming off of back-to-back knee injuries, we understand that. But there's still a ton of versatility on that line. So if you're able to just even add one piece that can contend for a spot, you come out of this draft class a winner because you're able to improve your offensive line.
Yeah, for sure. You've hit a good point there too, because the versatility is a huge strength on that offensive line. Tons of players who can move around. I mean, I look at that especially on the interior right now, because really you could put any of those players on any spot in the interior, aside from a few. Like Brand Sheriff's probably not going to play center for you, but
Hmm.
like you've got a lot of versatility with these players, and that helps with your depth, and you don't have to worry as much about injuries as usual. Not that you don't worry at all, but it does help the situation. So we got one more selection here. Got one more pick before that. I've got the defensive line prospects pulled up. So, who for you off of this board would be your top guy? I know they met with Tyler Lacey, I believe, yesterday.
Hmm.
Maybe another name to throw in there.
My
Maybe
top
two more.
guys here would probably be the two top guys you have right there, Isaiah McGuire and KJ Henry. Both guys can get after the pass rush, as well as set the edge, can stop on rundowns, can be three down guys if you need them to be, or can be situational pass rushers. But if you're really looking for a designated pass rusher right here on the edge, I would go Thomas Incoom. He is a very interesting prospect out of Central Michigan, and he can total up the sacks like anybody in this class.
Gotcha. So is that the way you want to go with this? With Incum,
I'll
or
let
you
you
want
make
to?
this one because it depends on what you want out of the edge rusher.
Yeah, I would. I'd probably be looking for the pass rush repertoire mainly. I think that's where you need the impact. You've got run defenders. So,
Mhm.
who do you think would be the best fit for that then? McGuire, Henry,
I'll,
or Incum?
let's go Henry because I think you can get the most out of him, and I
All
think
right.
you can expedite the potential out of him as a designated pass rusher. He has the length that you're looking for that you lost from Arden Key, 6'4" size, and I believe he has 35-inch arms. Let me verify that because he graded out really well athletically,
That's really
and
good.
yeah, he has a lot of potential. And I think he has the versatility that you're looking for as well. He can step inside, step outside, same way that you kind of moved Arden Key around. I think he can fill either that Smoot or that key role for you. So he's a very interesting prospect. 6'4" size, 251. So he has the frame that you're looking for, 33-inch arms and 10-inch hands. So pretty good frame, and he could be a very good starter or very good backup if you need him to be. 4.6 speed on the 40-yard dash. Um, he has the 31.5-inch vertical jump and a 1.65 10-yard split, so he has get off.
Yeah, and it just adds on more to a lot of young talent at that position as well. Yeah, man, McGuire went the pick right after. That's
Yeah.
funny. But I mean, you've got right now Walker, who's your first overall pick. You've even got Jordan Smith. That, man, I'll tell you this: something that gets me more excited about him is just thinking with how good that draft was in 2021. I mean, every pick was hit. Even J2 Faley. If they kept him around, like, he still was a really good selection at that point. That was a miss by them. But the pick after was Jordan Smith. And that was the guy they traded up for. He was not picked that far behind. I think he was like, what, 122? Was it?
Yeah, I believe so. Let me
Yeah,
see.
so he was not that far behind. So you've got him in that room, which, according to what um, Locked On Jaguars was talking about the other day, he was slated to have half the snaps Arden Key was going to have with this team.
Hmm.
He was going to be their 3-4 outside linebacker kind of guy. Instead, Arden Key got thrust into more of that versatile role because he played there, played on the line, and so now you finally have Jordan Smith coming back, and you throw in KJ Henry at that to help with your pass rush, get your Arden Key replacement at this point in the draft. I think that's really good for this team.
Yeah.
Especially if you're bringing back DeJuan Smoot in this scenario too, which I think they will.
I think they will. I think they'll bring back Smoot, and then you add in essentially the addition of Jordan Smith since he was gone the entire year. He
Yeah,
has the length that you're looking for. I think he fills in the Arden Key role very well. I think there may be high expectations for him to be a dominant pass rusher, but Arden Key, let's honestly, I think Jags fans need to come to the realization This was not a 10 sack guy. This was not a 30, 40 pressure guy. This was a guy who had more of an uptick in usage in the latter end of the season. And because of the recency bias, we saw what he did at the tail end of the season and what he did in the postseason.
He said
And
South with an F. he did all these great things. He built up Jacksonville. He had the Civil War. He's a good guy. Like,
yeah,
I
I
loved
mean,
all the jokes about him after he left. That dude went from like fan favorite to just the most hated man in Jacksonville,
oh yeah,
which
the
quite
city turned
frankly he
against
asked
him.
for. Yeah, but I agree. Like he definitely had his role with the team. He was important to the
Mhm.
team, but he was not as important as most of your starters. He is a player you can replace. It just sucks he left. It sucks the way he left too. And it sucks what he said about the team since. And it sucks where he went. There's a lot
Yeah,
of things that just simply suck about it. But yeah, he's not like, it's not like you're
he's not
losing
gonna
Evan
break this
Ingram.
team.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I definitely agree
So
on
I
that.
with we're essentially getting the addition of Jordan Smith. He's coming back to the team. He's put on weight. He's put on muscle. He's up to 255 pounds based on Pro Football Reference, and he's 6'6", incredible length. And I think he has the measurables to do exactly what you asked of Arden Key. Last year he was a developmental prospect. So with him being injured, obviously you throw in a veteran like Arden Key on a prove it deal, and you see what type of production he can get. He proved it. He went and got paid. I'm comfortable with it. Now, would I be happy if we were able to retain Arden Key? Yes. Am I upset we lost him? Not necessarily. We didn't lose a Josh Allen,
Yeah.
you know. So to me, I'm comfortable with getting a guy like KJ Henry here that can fill in and help fill that role that Dewan Smoot and Arden Key are leaving behind. And if you're able to bring back Smoot as a veteran and he come back in say week 6 or 7, you have a great nucleus of pass rush then at that point.
You're a
You
heck of a
have
lot better than you were in the playoffs.
exactly. You have Josh Allen, Travon Walker, Jordan Smith, KJ Henry, and Dewan Smoot. And you're able to throw guys like Devin Lloyd on blitzes. You're able to do middle linebacker blitzes with Foya Aluakon, which we did see a little bit during the tail end of the season once Caldwell got comfortable in the scheme, and being able to scheme guys into, breaking in the middle of that backfield. And even Chad Muma can do a few blitzes here and there if you're able to. And obviously, we've seen the famous Rayshawn Jenkins blitzes from our strong safety position. So you still have a lot of potential to have a good stack number once you get to the tail end of the 2023-2024 season. So I would be ecstatic to get KJ Henry there.
Yeah, KJ Henry would be a good fit there. Yeah, we got our other guy that does the On the Prowl podcast with us in the chat, this evil Chiefs fan. So definitely, if you're in here, give him some booze because he deserves that for being a Chiefs fan. Want to make sure he's not welcome. But yeah, no, I agree with that. You get a lot of good value in this, and you go after some players that you feel like have good upside that can start on the team, at least challenge for spots and raise the floor in some important rooms, especially rooms that you just need depth in. So, I mean, overall, I like the draft. It would be cool if you had a better player fall to the first selection, or
Yes.
someone like a Broderick Jones falls down the board, or Nolan Smith, or Brian Branch, but you still get really good depth in all of these places, and you get some good starters. So, definitely some good value there. So yeah, I
Yeah, I'm
think
very.
with that we might wrap up here. So, you got anything else you'd like to say, or anything on the
Um,
draft?
I really love this class. I'm actually excited if we were to get this class. Like you said, I would like to do something a little different there at pick 24. But if that's how the board falls, I'm not upset about it. because I really like all 5 of these prospects that we got in the top 4 rounds. Henry fills a need, Zavala fills a need, Hutchinson fills a need, Phillips fills a huge need and brings production, and Kincaid fills a really big need at tight end too, and could be tight end 1 following next year. So I think it's a really good class. I think you get a lot of value, and getting KJ Henry and Zavala in the 4th round, it's a home run.
For sure. And man, as much as I thought this might look a little different than most of the drafts I've done, literally like all of the selections in the first 3 rounds were guys I would have picked. just the way it fell. I figured we'd probably get some different guys in, like Branch, or I don't know who in the 2nd round exactly, maybe an edge rusher instead, but yeah, good value around here. So, but yeah, and like Griffin's saying here, yeah, a lot of great players should be available later in this draft. It is a very deep draft class, so that's going to be an important part too. You look at like what San Francisco does every year. They are able to be so successful all the time, even with quarterback issues, because they get these compensatory picks later in the draft. They spend them well, and that's what Jacksonville's going to have to do, especially next year when they get that one from Jawan Taylor, 97th overall pick. Should be really nice.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, well, before we wrap up, though, just want to say to you guys, if you like what you heard tonight, which I really enjoyed having you on, there's a lot of great insight and know a lot more, I think, than a lot of people who cover the Jaguars. Not an insult, by the way, at all, but you know a lot about the players more than I do. And so I think you have a lot to offer there. And for sure, like if you guys are looking for someone to listen to talk about the Jaguars, some other topics too, definitely go check him out. I've got him pinned up above, so be a good channel to go subscribe to and follow. So it's great to support everyone doing this, and I'm sure you're going to have some awesome content. So appreciate you coming on.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, not a problem at all. So with that said, I want to thank you guys for joining us tonight. Not sure when we'll have the next live stream. Might be a little bit. Kind of depends on what happens here. We get any free agent signings, draft news, anything important like that. Heck, maybe it's Lamar Jackson going to the Colts, which I hope he just sucks if he goes there. But yeah. So that all said, thank you guys for watching. I hope you have a great rest of your day. And finally,